Let's start with something recent. Off the coast of Somalia, piracy became a serious threat in the early 2000s. Ships were being hijacked, crews taken hostage, and ransom demands made. In one case, two aid workers, Jessica Buchanan from the U.S. and Paul Hagen Thisted from Denmark, were kidnapped and held for months. Negotiations failed. The pirates wouldn't budge. So the U.S. sent in SEAL Team 6. These are the same guys who took out Osama bin Laden. They parachuted into Somalia at night, landed miles from the compound, and moved in on foot. Quiet. Focused. When they reached the compound, they launched a quick and precise assault. All 9 pirates were killed. No SEALs were hurt. The hostages were rescued and flown to safety. President Obama called Jessica's father personally to tell him she was safe. It was one of those missions that barely made the news, but for the people involved, it was life-changing. This wasn't the first time Somali pirates had tangled with the U.S. military. In 2010, pirates fired on the USS Nicholas. The ship returned fire, disabled their boat, and captured them. A year earlier, Navy SEAL snipers rescued Captain Richard Phillips from a lifeboat, killing 3 pirates in a tense standoff. That one made headlines, but most of these operations happen quietly. These aren't traditional wars. There's no battlefield, no uniforms, just small boats, desperate men, and dangerous waters. Somalia hasn't had a stable government in decades. Its coastline became a hunting ground. But the U.S. made it clear, hostages would be rescued, and pirates wouldn't get away with it. Now, let's go back in time, because this kind of conflict isn't new. In the early 1800s, the U.S. faced a similar problem with pirates from North Africa, the Barbary states. These were rulers in places like Tripoli and Algiers who demanded tribute payments to leave American ships alone. Most European countries paid, but the U.S. refused. Tripoli declared war. The First Barbary War began. American ships blockaded the coast. Marines landed and fought in unfamiliar terrain. One famous moment came when the USS Philadelphia was captured. Lieutenant Stephen Decatur led a daring raid to burn the ship so it couldn't be used against them. The war ended with a treaty, and the U.S. stopped paying tribute. But that wasn't the end. During the War of 1812, Algiers started attacking American ships again. After the war with Britain ended, the U.S. sent a fleet back to the Mediterranean. Decatur returned, captured enemy ships, and forced Algiers to sign a treaty. Tribute payments were over. American captives were released. It was a clear message. The U.S. would protect its people, even far from home. Speaking of the War of 1812, it's one of the most misunderstood wars in American history. It started because Britain was interfering with American trade and forcing U.S. sailors into their navy. There were also tensions with native tribes in the Northwest. The U.S. declared war, hoping to defend its rights and maybe even take parts of Canada. The war didn't go smoothly. British troops invaded Washington, D.C., and burned the Capitol and the White House. But there were victories, too, like the Battle of Lake Erie and the Battle of New Orleans. That last one happened after the war was technically over, but it boosted morale and made Andrew Jackson a national hero. The war ended in a draw. No land changed hands. But it proved that the U.S. could stand up to a global power. It also weakened native resistance and helped shape the country's future. In 1832, another conflict broke out, the Blackhawk War. Sauk leader Blackhawk led his people back to their ancestral lands in Illinois, hoping to reclaim what had been taken. The U.S. government saw it as a threat. Militias and regular troops were sent in. The fighting was short but intense. Blackhawk's group was pursued across the Midwest. At the Battle of Bad Axe, hundreds were killed as they tried to cross the Mississippi River. Blackhawk was captured and imprisoned. The war ended quickly, but it marked the final resistance of native tribes in that region. It also involved future leaders like Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis, who served in the militias. At the end of the 19th century, the U.S. fought the Spanish-American War. It started after the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor. The U.S. blamed Spain, and public pressure pushed the country into war. In just a few months, American forces defeated Spain in Cuba and the Philippines.
The Treaty of Paris gave the U.S. control of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. It was the start of America's overseas empire. But in the Philippines, things got complicated. The locals had fought against Spain, hoping for independence. Instead, they found themselves under American rule. This led to the Philippine-American War. It was brutal. Guerrilla fighters attacked U.S. troops. The military responded with harsh tactics, burning villages, relocating civilians, and using methods that sparked controversy. Over 200,000 Filipinos died. The war ended with American control, but it left deep scars. And it didn't end there. In the southern Philippines, the Moro Rebellion broke out. The Moros, or Muslim communities, in Mindanao and the Sulu archipelago. They had resisted Spanish rule for centuries. Now they resisted American control. The fighting lasted more than a decade. It was intense and personal. The Moros fought to protect their land, their religion, and their way of life. American forces, including future General John J. Pershing, tried to pacify the region. One of the most infamous battles was at Budajo, where hundreds of Moros, including women and children, were killed inside a volcanic crater. The event sparked outrage back home, but the war continued. The Moro Rebellion ended in 1913, but the resistance never fully disappeared. The conflict laid the groundwork for future tensions in the region and shaped how the U.S. approached counterinsurgency warfare. Around the same time, the U.S. was involved in a series of interventions across Central America and the Caribbean, known as the Banana Wars. These weren't declared wars, but they involved military occupations, police actions, and direct combat. American companies like United Fruit had massive investments in countries like Nicaragua, Honduras, and Haiti. When political instability threatened those interests, the U.S. sent in Marines. In Nicaragua, the U.S. fought a guerrilla war against nationalist leader Augusto Cesar Sandino. In Haiti and the Dominican Republic, American forces occupied the countries for years, reshaping their governments and economies. These interventions were justified as efforts to promote stability and democracy, but they often supported authoritarian regimes and protected corporate interests. The term Banana Republic came from this era, a symbol of countries whose politics were shaped by foreign business and military power. In 1910, the Mexican Revolution erupted. The U.S. kept a close eye on the border. When revolutionary Pancho Villa attacked the town of Columbus, New Mexico, the U.S. responded with a punitive expedition led by General Pershing. Thousands of troops entered Mexico, searching for Villa. They never caught him, but the operation showed how quickly border tensions could escalate. The Mexican border war lasted nearly a decade. It involved raids, skirmishes, and political maneuvering. The U.S. built forts, patrolled the border, and tried to keep the violence from spilling over. It was a messy, complicated conflict, one that shaped U.S.-Mexico relations for years to come. After World War II, the nature of war changed. The Cold War began, a global struggle between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Instead of direct battles, the U.S. fought proxy wars and carried out interventions to stop the spread of communism. In Korea, Vietnam, and later in places like Laos and Cambodia, American troops were sent to fight insurgencies and support allied governments. These wars were often controversial, with unclear goals and heavy costs. In Latin America, the U.S. supported coups and counterinsurgency campaigns. In Guatemala, Chile, and Nicaragua, American involvement shaped political outcomes, sometimes at the expense of democracy. These post-World War II interventions were part of a broader strategy. The U.S. saw itself as the defender of freedom, but the reality on the ground was often more complicated. Local populations paid the price, and many of these conflicts are still unresolved. All these wars, whether fought against pirates, empires, rebels, or ideologies, played a role in shaping the United States. They tested its resolve, expanded its reach, and forced it to confront hard questions about power, justice, and identity. They may not be remembered in everyday conversation. They may not have monuments on every corner, but they mattered, and the people